St. John Bosco was a priest who lived in Italy in the mid-1800s. He was called to care for young boys and teach them how to work, pray, and do different trades. He is personally one of my favorite saints. I will tell his story in more detail soon, but this video will focus on his amazing dreams. He wrote all of his dreams down, as he was sometimes directed to do by God or the Blessed Virgin, and he would also often tell the dreams to his boys to explain what they meant. Over 150 dreams have been recorded and passed down. Like the biblical prophets, God spoke to St. John Bosco through his dreams and often sent the Blessed Mother to be his personal guide through the dreams. Though normally we shouldn't put too much stock into our dreams, St. John understood that his dreams were very different. Unlike our dreams, which tend to be filled with little bits of this or that, St. John's dreams were told in sequence. He was also able to ask questions and receive answers from his guide. Sometimes his dreams were told in parables, and most of the time they were so real that he thought he was awake. St. John's first dream happened when he was 9 years old, probably the most popular and famous dream he's had. This dream tells what God was calling him to in life. When I was about 9 years old, I had a dream that left a profound impression on me for the rest of my life. I dreamed that I was near my home in a very large playing field where a crowd of children were having fun. Some were laughing, others were playing, and many of them were cursing. I was so shocked at their language that I jumped into their midst, swinging wildly and shouting at them to stop. At that moment, a man appeared, nobly attired, with a manly and imposing bearing. He was clad with a white flowing mantle, and his face radiated such light that I could not look directly at him. He called me by name and told me to place myself as leader of those boys, adding these words: "You will have to win these friends of yours not with blows, but with gentleness and kindness. So begin right now to show them that sin is ugly and virtue beautiful." Confused and afraid, I replied that I was only a boy and unable to talk to these youngsters about religion. At that moment, the fighting, shouting, and cursing stopped, and the crowd of boys gathered around the man who was talking. Almost unconsciously, I asked, "But how can you order me to do something that looks so impossible?" "What seems so impossible, you must achieve by being obedient and acquiring knowledge." "But where? How?" "I will give you a teacher under whose guidance you will learn, and without whose help all knowledge becomes foolishness." "But who are you?" "I am the son of her whom your mother has taught you to greet 3 times a day." At that moment, I saw beside him a lady of majestic appearance, wearing a beautiful mantle, glowing as if bedecked with stars. She saw my confusion mount, so she beckoned me to her. Taking my hand with great kindness, she said, "Look." I did so. All the children had vanished. In their place, I saw many animals. There were goats, dogs, cats, bears, and a variety of others. "This is your field. This is where you must work," the lady told me. "Make yourself humble, steadfast, and strong. And what you will see happen to these animals, you will have to do for my children." I looked again. The wild animals had turned into as many lambs, gentle gambling lambs, bleating a welcome for that man and lady. At this point of my dream, I started to cry, and I begged the lady to explain what it all meant, because I was so utterly confused. She then placed her hand on my head and said, "In due time, everything will be clear to you." After she had spoken these words, some noise awakened me. Everything had vanished. I was completely bewildered. Somehow, my hands still ached and my cheeks still stung because of all the fighting. Moreover, my conversation with that man and lady so disturbed my mind that I was unable to sleep any longer that night. One night, St. John Bosco had a dream that he was hearing confessions. Again, this dream was so real that John had a hard time telling if it was real or if he was dreaming. He clapped his hands to see if he would wake himself up, and then he felt along the brick wall of the church to see if he could feel it. Satisfied that he wasn't dreaming, he started to hear the confessions of his boys. But because there were so many of them, he was worried that there wouldn't be enough time to hear them all, so he stepped out of the confessional to see if he could find the other priest. To his great surprise, when he saw the boys waiting in line, he noticed that some of the boys had a noose around their neck. Here I will let St. John Bosco tell the rest of his story from his memoirs. "What is that rope for?" I asked. "Take it off." In reply, they just stared at me. "You," I said to a youngster, "go to that boy and slip that noose off his neck." The boy went, but came back saying, "I can't get it off. Someone is holding it. Come and see." I scrutinized that huge crowd of boys more closely and thought I saw two very long horns jutting out behind many of them. I got closer to the one nearest me, and drawing up behind him, I saw a hideous cat tightly clinging to the noose. Surprised in the act, it tried to crouch lower and hide its snout between its paws. I asked this boy and the others their names, but they did not answer. I questioned that frightful beast, but it only crouched lower. "Go to the sacristy and ask Father Maloney for the holy water," I directed one of the boys. He soon returned with it, but meanwhile, I discovered that behind each boy crouched a cat as hideous as the first one. I continued to hope that it was a dream. Seizing the sprinkler, I turned to one of those large cats. "Tell me who you are," I ordered. Alternately opening and closing its jaws, the hideous animal broke into a growl and prepared to lunge. "Answer me," I insisted. "What are you doing here? I do not fear your rage. Do you see this holy water? I will thoroughly soak you with it." In dismay, the monster began to writhe in unbelievable contortions and again seemed ready to leap at me. I kept my eye on it and noticed that it was holding several nooses in its paw. "What are you doing here?" I asked again, while threatening it with the holy water. "Look, then," it growled, and showed me its nooses. "What are they? What do you mean?" I asked. "Don't you understand? I roped these boys into making bad confessions. With these nooses, I dragged 9/10 of mankind into hell. Then in the name of Jesus Christ, speak." Writhing hideously, the monster answered, "With the first noose, I make the boys conceal their sins and confession. And with the second, I make them confess without true sorrow. And with the third, I won't tell you. You had better, or you'll be drenched with this holy water." Flames and even a few drops of blood darted from the beast's eyes as it grudgingly muttered, "With the third noose, I keep them from making a firm resolution and carrying out their confessor's advice." "You hideous beast," I exclaimed. I wanted to question the monster further and force it to tell me how I could remedy this great evil and offset its diabolical efforts, but all those hideous cats, which until now had done their utmost to stay hidden, began to mutter and then broke out into loud shouts against the one that had spoken. I realized that I could get nothing more from the monster. Therefore, I lifted the sprinkler and flinging holy water upon the one whom I had spoken, I commanded, "Go away," and it disappeared. Then I sprinkled holy water all about, and in the chaos which ensued, all those cats scurried away. The din awakened me, and I found myself in bed. Later that night, St. John told his boys during the good night address about the dream. He said, "My dear boys, I would never have thought that so many of you had nooses around your necks. You know what they stand for. The first noose shames a boy into concealing sins in confession or lying about the number of times. For instance, accusing himself of committing a sin 3 or 4 times, when it was exactly 4 times. This is just as insincere as concealing sins. The second stands for lack of sorrow, and the third for lack of firm resolution. If we are to rid ourselves of these nooses and wrench them from the devil's clutches, let us all confess all our sins and be truly sorry for them." Not all of St. John's dreams were consoling. One of them predicted a death among the boys in the oratory. John's dream went as follows. In his dream, John was leaning out the window, watching the boys play joyfully in the playground below. Suddenly, he saw a tall old man enter the playground. He was dressed in a winding sheet wrapped around himself and carried a blue torch. He walked among the boys, looking at each one intently, as if trying to find someone. The boys continued to play, and John Bosco watched the man carefully, puzzled as to who he was or why he was there. Then the old man stopped in front of a boy who was playing cops and robbers. He held up the blue torch in front of the boy to get a better look, and he said, "He's the one, I'm sure." Then he cornered the boy and gave him a folded note. The boy unfolded the note and read it, his face going pale. "When?" he asked. "Soon?" "Now," the old man replied. John Bosco heard the boys say, "Can I finish the game? You may be caught while you're playing." John understood that this meant sudden death. The old man pointed to a coffin that was lying by the portico. He said, "Do you see that coffin? It's for you. Let's go." The boy screamed, "I'm too young to die. I'm not ready." At this, John woke up. As strange as it might seem, Father Bosco told his boys of this dream and that it meant that one of them would soon die. Of course, this frightened the boys, but John cared more about the state of their souls than anything else and wanted them to be ready. Every night before bed, he would gather the boys together and give them what he called his good night address. And he told them, "From what I have said, you may well understand that one of you must prepare himself, because the Lord will soon call him into eternity. I know who he is because I saw the whole thing. I know the boy to whom the stranger handed the note. He is here now listening to me, but I shall tell no one till after his death. However, I will do all I can to prepare him for a happy death. Let each of you look after himself, for while he wonders who it is, he himself may be just the one. I have told you this because if I fail to do so, the Lord would ask me, 'Why did you not speak up at the proper time?'" Of course, all the boys wanted to know if it was he who would die, but John wouldn't tell. He only told them that all of them must prepare themselves. He did let them know how and when it would happen. He told them that it would be a sudden death and that it would happen 2 feast days starting with the letter P. Those 2 feast days were Pascua, which means Easter, and Pentecost. Then on April 16th, a 12-year-old boy named Louis died unexpectedly at his home after he had become sick at the oratory. Of course, everyone thought that this was the boy that was predicted to die, but Father Bosco said that this was not the boy that he had seen in his dream. It should also be said that, even though John Bosco didn't know that this boy would die, this boy had taken to heart all that John Bosco had said and had prepared himself with good behavior in the sacraments, which helped him to have a holy death. However, as boys and even a few other priests questioned John Bosco if this was the boy in his dream, he didn't say much to the boys, but to his fellow priests he let them know that Louis was not the boy he saw in his dream. To the other boys he only said, "Let us not allow the devil to delude us into thinking we may put our conscience in order at the moment of death." A month went by since the prediction, and the first feast day, Easter, had gone. The boys constantly murmured against themselves, "Who will die and when? Pascua, the first P, is gone." Then on April 25th, a 13-year-old boy named Victor died unexpectedly from a stroke. A few weeks before he died, he was having trouble with his vision, and 2 or 3 days before his stroke, he was complaining of chest pain. The doctor, not suspecting anything serious, ordered more sleep. Before he died, it was to this boy that St. John Bosco gave a little clue that death was coming. One day he saw Victor and asked him spontaneously, "Do you want to go to heaven?" Victor said, "Of course." "Then get ready," Father Bosco said, surprising him. But Victor laughed, thinking that Father Bosco was just having fun with him. However, St. John Bosco kept a close eye on Victor during all this time, quietly preparing Victor for a holy death by helping him make a good confession and stay close to Jesus, all without Victor ever knowing that it was he who would die. Victor died the morning he was to go home for his Easter holiday. After hearing Mass, he went back to bed for a little bit as he felt tired, and it was then that he had a stroke. One of the boys discovered him and went screaming for a priest. One of the priests got to Victor's side to give him absolution before he died. In his good night address that night, John Bosco said, "How mistaken people are," he exclaimed, "to delay clearing their conscience till the end of their life. Let us thank the Lord for thus calling into eternity 2 companions who, we are sure, were spiritually ready. How much more would we grieve if others had been taken whose conduct is quite unsatisfactory?" Victor's death was a blessing of the Lord. On Saturday morning and evening, boys of great numbers wanted to make a general confession. With 2 or 3 words, John Bosco put their minds at ease. Later, he said very plainly, "Victor was the boy whom I saw receive the note in my dream. What deeply consoles me is that he went to the sacraments that very Friday morning. His death was sudden, but not unprovided." Out of all the dreams St. John Bosco had, I have time only to tell these four. We will end with an important dream which is good for all of us. I dreamed that you boys were heading in procession toward a lofty, richly decorated altar of Our Lady. You were all singing the same hymns to her, but not in the same way. Many sang beautifully, others rather poorly, and some totally out of tune. I saw too that some kept silent, strayed from the ranks, yawned, or kept disturbing others. Everyone carried gifts, mostly flowers, to Our Lady. The bouquets differed in kind and size. There were bouquets of roses, carnations, violets, and so on. Some boys carried very odd presents, such as pigs' heads, cats, slimy toads and rabbits, lambs, and so on. A handsome youth stood by the altar. A close look would show that he had wings. He may have been the oratory's guardian angel. As you boys presented your gifts, he took each and placed it on the altar. The first one to reach the altar offered gorgeous bouquets, which the angel silently placed on it. From other bouquets instead, he had to remove decayed or scentless flowers, such as dahlias, camellias, and the like, because Mary is not satisfied with mere looks. Some bouquets even had thorns or nails, which of course were promptly plucked out and thrown away. When a boy carrying a pig's head came up, the angel said to him, "How dare you offer this to Our Lady? Don't you know this animal symbolizes the ugly vice of impurity? Mary, most pure, cannot tolerate such a sin. Step aside. You are not worthy to stand in her presence." To those who offered cats, the angel said, "Don't you know better? A cat represents theft, and you dare present it to Mary? Those who take what does not belong to them, those who steal food from the house, tear their clothes out of spite, or waste their parents' money by not studying as they ought, are nothing but thieves." These too the angel ordered to withdraw. He was equally indignant with boys offering toads. Toads symbolize the shameful sin of scandal, and dare you offer them to Our Lady? Step aside, join the unworthy ones. These boys too shamefully withdrew. Some lads came up with a knife stuck in their hearts, a symbol of sacrilege. "Don't you realize that there is death in your soul?" the angel asked them. "If it were not for God's mercy, you would be lost forever. For heaven's sake, have that knife removed from your heart." Eventually, the rest of the boys reached the altar and presented their gifts: lambs, rabbits, fish, grapes, and so on. The angel took them and placed them before Our Lady. Then he lined up in the front of the altar all the boys whose gifts had been accepted. I noticed, to my regret, that those who had been made to step aside were much more numerous than I had thought. Two other angels now appeared at each side of the altar, carrying ornate baskets filled with the most gorgeous, exceedingly beautiful crowns of roses. With these, the guardian angel crowned all the boys ranged before Our Lady's altar. The angel then addressed all the boys as follows: "It was Our Lady's wish that you should be crowned today with these beautiful roses. See to it that they never be taken away from you. Humility, obedience, and chastity will safeguard them for you. With these three virtues, you will always find favor with Mary, and one day receive a crown infinitely more beautiful than what you wear today." All of you then sing the first stanza of the Ave Maria Stella, Hail, Star of the Sea, and afterwards you turned around and filed away that you had come. You sang so full-heartedly that I was really amazed. I followed you for a while, and then I went back to take a look at the boys whom the angel had pushed aside, but they were no longer there. My dear children, I know who is crowned and who is turned down. The latter I will warn privately, so that they may strive to bring gifts pleasing to Our Lady. In this dream I saw both your past and your future. I have already spoken of it to many of you. I shall likewise tell the rest. Meanwhile, my children, see to it that the Blessed Virgin may always receive gifts from you which she will not have to refuse. Did you enjoy hearing of St. John Bosco's dreams? Leave me a comment if you would like to hear more.